Welcome to Understanding Georgia Service Delivery Strategy Agreements, a presentation of the Carl Vinson Institute of Government at the University of Georgia. The purpose of this tutorial is to enable the viewer to be able to recognize the significance of service delivery strategy agreements, understand the history leading to the Service Delivery Strategy Act, identify the requirements of service delivery strategy agreements, and to recognize how service delivery strategy agreements are made. The Service Delivery Strategy Act. The Service Delivery Strategy Act is a Georgia state law that requires local governments within each of Georgia's 159 counties to come to a formal agreement about how service provision will be accomplished. Service delivery strategy arrangements can potentially increase the efficiency of service provision, stave off or minimize tax increases, and make services better or easier for citizens to access. Failure to remain in compliance means that the county and cities lose their qualified local government status and therefore are not eligible for state-administered grants or loans, such as CDBG, state-issued permits, such as radar detection or EPD permits. For local governments, the possible negative consequences of being out of compliance with the Service Delivery Strategy Act are significant. Obviously, not all counties and cities are alike, but the general wording of the sanctions provision of the Service Delivery Strategy Act is designed to incentivize all local governments that are out of compliance, whether big or small. Most local governments have avoided ever being out of compliance. We will briefly consider one instance in which a group of local governments were out of compliance. In February of 2009, the Service Delivery Strategy Agreement between one of Georgia's largest counties and several cities expired after 2 years of unsuccessful attempts to renegotiate. The county filed for court-ordered alternative dispute resolution, and after 7 days' worth of mediation sessions over the months of March, April, May, and June between county negotiators and city representatives, the parties failed to come to an agreement. Litigation lasting 2 years followed. A trial court issued an order on September the 23rd, 2011, and a final consent decree dealing with the final issues was issued in February of 2012, a full 3 years after the expiration of the agreement. Elected leadership among the local governments has changed significantly since the beginning of the dispute, but many elected and appointed officials for each of the involved governments serving then acknowledged that this period marked a difficult time in their public service tenures. The potential impact of local governments failing to timely renegotiate the Service Delivery Strategy Agreement are significant, as demonstrated by each of the facts listed here. Litigation lasted 2+ years. By the end of the first year, it had cost more than $500,000 in public money collectively between the cities and the county. Some of the city and county law enforcement agencies became unable to enforce speed limits with radar. The County Recorder's Court revenue declined by $400,000 just for the first quarter of 2011, and $25 million in county grant funding was jeopardized. The quote here is from a 35-year county resident that attended a public meeting during the service delivery dispute. Most citizens appreciate the receipt of local government service, but care little for which particular local government is responding when their house is on fire. They simply want the service and rely on their elected representatives to work out the details of how the service is provided. Even though the path to renegotiation can be difficult, this is not in most instances the case. These agreements create an opportunity to improve service delivery through partnerships between local governments. The chair pictured here is from Independence Hall, and the carving at the top of the chair depicts the top half of a sun. It is reported that Benjamin Franklin remarked at the end of the Constitutional Convention that he had often looked at the image carved into the back of the chair during the debates and wondered whether it was a rising or setting sun. At the successful conclusion of the convention, he indicated his belief that it was a rising sun. Service delivery strategy negotiations between local governments may require a good deal of discussion, but the hope is that once an agreement is reached, local services will be provided equitably and efficiently. In other words, that the local government leaders involved will see a rising sun. The history of the Service Delivery Strategy Act. It may be helpful to consider the history that led to the adoption of the Service Delivery Strategy Act. Prior to the adoption of Amendment 19 to the state constitution, now known as the Supplementary Powers Provision, county commissioners in Georgia were generally known as Commissioners of Roads and Revenues, because their primary duties were to raise revenues to fund the operations of the courts and the sheriff and to build roads. Large urban counties, particularly DeKalb County, have been pushing for legislation that would grant the authority to provide municipal-type services to residents in the unincorporated areas, and voters statewide agreed to extend that authority to counties. Various counties were involved with providing some of these services on an ad hoc basis pursuant to various local legislative acts before the adoption of Amendment 19. After its adoption, broad legal authority was granted to counties to provide municipal-type services. The language of the supplementary powers provision makes clear that counties can provide the entire range of municipal services. In fact, it is worded in a way that simultaneously grants authority to cities and counties to provide the same municipal-type services. This list of supplemental powers is all the services cities and counties are authorized to provide by the Constitution, but these are in addition to services and duties imposed by state law. They are the primary areas that become the focus of service delivery strategy negotiations. It is probably worth noting here that while Amendment 19 largely erased differences in service delivery powers between cities and counties, there are still major areas where counties differ in their responsibilities. These include the structural relationship and funding responsibility counties have with respect to constitutional officers, and the provision of certain county-based state services, such as the county boards of health. The supplementary powers provision has two key components in addition to listing the services that cities and counties can both provide. The first is that it dictates that no city may provide the listed services outside its limits, and no county can provide services inside a city's limits or inside another county without an agreement between the applicable local governments, unless otherwise authorized by law. So, for example, a county could not operate sanitation service inside the city limits of one of the cities located in the county unless there was an agreement between the city and the county, or some other law authorizing the county to do so. The Service Delivery Strategy Agreement, however, is one such contract that might allow for such a service arrangement. Copies of any such agreements should be available from all jurisdictions entering into them. The state constitution's Intergovernmental Agreements Clause allows such arrangements to last up to 40 years. The second key provision is that the state legislature can't withdraw the authority from local governments to provide these services. However, they can regulate, restrict, or limit the exercise of the powers, provided they do so by general law. This provision may come as a surprise to some, but it is one of the sources of home rule for local governments in the Georgia Constitution. An example that might be helpful to illustrate the meaning of this provision is county police departments. The Georgia General Assembly adopted OCGA Section 36-8-1, which provides that should county governments wish to create a police department after January 1, 1992, they must hold and pass a referendum before doing so. It is not a complete withdrawal of the home rule authority to provide police protection, but it is a significant hurdle to doing so. Only a handful of counties in Georgia have county police departments, and most rely on the sheriff for county law enforcement services. After the law changed, population in Georgia continued to grow. During most of the period between 1970 and 2000, the population of Georgia doubled. The growth in the unincorporated areas outpaced the growth inside cities by almost 2 to 1. This rapidly expanding population in unincorporated areas placed pressure on county governments to provide municipal services to the populations living in their jurisdictions that were not being served by a city government. The uptick in the rate of growth in cities as opposed to the unincorporated area in 2010 is due largely to the creation of new cities out of urban areas that were previously located in the unincorporated areas of counties. For example, the city of Sandy Springs, which was created out of unincorporated Fulton County in 2005, and the city of Dunwoody, which was created out of unincorporated DeKalb County in 2008. Before there was the Service Delivery Strategy Act, there was the Georgia Future Communities Commission. A 30-member commission created by the General Assembly in 1995 met for 3 years, comprised of business leaders, legislators, county commissioners, and city officials. At the swearing-in of the commission members, then-Governor Zell Miller spoke and stated that the commission was an opportunity for local governments to address how they can become more efficient, eliminating the disputes and the competition. The commission was created by a resolution adopted by the General Assembly in 1995 and slated to last for 18 months. The General Assembly eventually extended the commission for another year. The most significant piece of legislation that was adopted as a result was the Service Delivery Strategy Act, or as it was called for years after the fact, House Bill 489. The Georgia Chamber of Commerce got more appointments, 9 of 30, than any other entity asked to make appointments, and the commission was chaired by Arnold Tenenbaum, president of Chatham Steel Corporation. This reflected a growing concern being raised by business leaders at the time that there was too much duplication of water and sewer infrastructure. Where water and sewer infrastructure is located dictates where industry, commercial, and significant residential development can be located. The power to control the location of water and sewer infrastructure is the power to control where development occurs. At the same time, multiple neighboring water and sewer systems, often with pipes running down the same side of the street or opposite sides of the same street, creates inefficiencies and often could be made cheaper if serviced by one provider. The photograph above was taken at the Johns Creek Water Reclamation Facility, a Fulton County owned and operated treatment plant that has helped to clean up the Chattahoochee River and has won several awards. Pictured are county commissioners and 2 mayors at the facility placing a time capsule with local school children. Service delivery roles within a county should be assigned to provide the service at the lowest cost, create an equitable financing agreement, ensure political accountability, and utilize the most efficient and technically proficient administrative unit. This quote comes from the report of the Recommendations of the Georgia Future Communities Commission, Volume 1, published in 1999. The stated goals and numerous specific recommendations were included in the Service Delivery Strategy Act itself. It is to the Service Delivery Strategy Act and its requirements that we now shift our focus. The boards of both the Association of County Commissioners Georgia, ACCG, and the Georgia Municipal Association, GMA, endorsed draft legislation based on the Future Communities Commission recommendations, which was later embraced by the Commission and introduced as House Bill 489 in 1997 by State Representative A. Richard Royal, then serving as chairman of the House Committee on State Planning and Community Affairs. The bill passed and was signed into law as the Service Delivery Strategy Act. ACCG, GMA, and the Georgia Department of Community Affairs came together and through the Carl Vinson Institute of Government at UGA published a guidebook, charting a course for cooperation and collaboration. Both associations, the Carl Vinson Institute of Government and the Georgia Department of Community Affairs, came together in the summer of 1997 to offer training to explain the new law to local government officials. The new law imposed a deadline of July 1, 1999 for adoption of their initial strategy. The quote here from the law communicates the essence of the legislative intent. The intent is to provide a flexible framework, that is, efficient and responsive, is intended to minimize inefficiencies resulting from duplication and competition between local governments, and to provide a mechanism to resolve disputes over local government service delivery, funding equity, and land use. This definition of the benefit principle from the American Academy of Financial Management underlies the policy against double taxation in the Service Delivery Strategy Act. In the service delivery context, this means that generally speaking, local taxpayers should not have to pay towards services from which their jurisdiction doesn't benefit, not that each taxpayer receives an individual benefit from services equal to their individual tax burden. While the fairness of paying towards what you receive underlies the Service Delivery Strategy Act, some services are easier to sort out than others. The devil is in the details, so to speak. Think about the following for a minute. Do county roads in the unincorporated area benefit city residents? Do unincorporated residents benefit from investments made by cities in amenities like parks that are used by those living in the nearby unincorporated area? The answer to both questions is almost certainly yes, but apportioning the burden for such benefits can be very difficult. It may be helpful to think through how the activities and services provided by each government benefit the citizens in different ways, and to recognize that their future directions are in many ways linked. Service Delivery Strategy Requirements. The law requires that each service delivery strategy must include an identification of all services presently provided in the county by cities, counties, and authorities, an assignment of which local government will be responsible for providing which service in what area of the county, a description of how all the services will be funded, and an identification of intergovernmental contracts, ordinances, resolutions, etc. to be used in implementing the strategy. In assigning and implementing service delivery responsibilities, the strategy should provide for the elimination of duplication of services or an explanation for its existence. The law also recognizes that municipalities often exist in order to provide higher levels of service to their constituents. One example of a city providing a higher level of service is Smyrna in Cobb County. Cobb County provides countywide library services out of the County General Fund. The City of Smyrna operates a library out of its City General Fund. Residents of the City of Smyrna pay into both general funds and may utilize the services of both the city and county library systems. The service delivery strategy agreements list many of the programs available at the city library that are unique. Services provided primarily for unincorporated areas must be funded by revenues derived from the unincorporated areas. In Toombs County, for example, the county pays for fire protection services in the unincorporated area through the insurance premiums tax collected in the unincorporated area. Two of the cities, Lyons and Vidalia, fund their fire departments within the cities through their general funds, and the small city of Santa Claus contracts with the city of Lyons for its fire protection. Insurance premiums taxes must, by law, be spent by counties on either funding police, fire, solid waste collection, curbs, sidewalks and streetlights, or other services provided in the unincorporated area, or, if they don't provide such services, to reduce the ad valorem property tax rate in the unincorporated area. This is pursuant to the Official Code of Georgia, Section 33-8-8.3. The map pictured here was taken from the Toombs County Service Delivery Strategy Agreement on file with the Georgia Department of Community Affairs. Jurisdictions charging water and sewer rate differentials to customers outside their boundaries must be able to justify such differentials. It is often the case that it is more expensive to serve customers the further away they are from certain facilities because of topography or due to lack of density. Thus, some municipalities that serve outside their jurisdiction may be able to justify charging higher rates. There is a process for disputing higher water or sewer rates provided by another jurisdiction. This can be a city versus city dispute as well as a city versus county dispute. In these instances, it is often best for local governments to try and work out the dispute between the governments. The service-providing government is likely to have its own engineering studies showing that the rate is not arbitrary, making litigation expensive and uncertain for the disputing government. One approach might be for the receiving and providing governments to share costs on an engineering study, agree on the methodologies to be used on the front end, and to abide by the results on the back end. The disputing local government may hold a public hearing to review the differential. A qualified engineer may be hired to prepare a rate study. If the study concludes that the difference in rates is arbitrary, it must be submitted to alternative dispute resolution. The disputing government may take the case to court if the alternative dispute resolution is not successful. Conflicts in land use plans within a county, between the county and its cities, must be eliminated. However, it is up to the city and county to determine if conflicts exist. Typically, these occur around the edges of municipal boundaries, either just inside or just outside the city limits, where a different or more intense type of use is allowed than on the adjacent land that is in the other jurisdiction. For example, an industrial operation in the unincorporated area of the county that adjoins a residential municipal development. As a practical matter, these issues often come up outside of service delivery strategy negotiations and are often resolved as a part of the comprehensive planning process. Service Delivery Strategy Agreements. All Service Delivery Strategy Agreements are downloadable from the Georgia Department of Community Affairs website. All 159 counties are listed in alphabetical order, and there may be multiple listings for each county along with the date. This typically indicates that there has been an amendment to the currently in effect Service Delivery Strategy Agreement that will have a later date associated with it. The later dated amendments should be read with the earlier and more comprehensive agreement. The formula for achieving a valid agreement relies on factors related to population rather than service delivery. Designed for the sake of simplicity, the population requirements for the different cities are determined by the most recent decennial census. A city that is the county site, or seat as they are sometimes called, is, for lack of a better analogy, the capital city of the county, determined by a local act of the General Assembly in which the county courthouse must be located. These very often can be small in population and may not be the most populous city in the county. Note that cities with less than 500 in population within the county do not have to sign the Service Delivery Strategy Agreement unless they serve as the county site. Note that some cities with populations up to 8,999 may not have to sign the agreement, depending upon how many other cities are located within the county, unless they are the county site. The formula for achieving a valid agreement relies on factors related to population rather than service delivery. Designed for the sake of simplicity, the population requirements for the different cities are determined by the most recent decennial census. A city that is the county site or seat, as they are sometimes called, is, for lack of a better analogy, the capital city of the county, determined by a local act of the General Assembly in which the county courthouse must be located. These very often can be small in population and may not be the most populous city in the county. Note that cities with less than 500 in population within the county do not have to sign the Service Delivery Strategy Agreement unless they serve as the county site. Note that some cities with populations up to 8,999 may not have to sign the agreement, depending on how many other cities are located within the county, unless they are the county site. Under this example, Spectacular County must sign any agreement, and the City of Awesome must sign any agreement because it is the county site. However, the City of Epic never has to be included in signing the agreement because its population within the county is only 499. Likewise, along with Epic, either the City of Terrific or the City of Super could be excluded from signing a Service Delivery Strategy Agreement because they have less than 9,000 people, and an agreement that includes either of them and the county site will constitute more than 50% of the cities with more than 500 people. The formula is designed to avoid the heckler's veto, that is, allowing one city or a city with a small presence in the county to prevent an agreement from being reached. Best practice would suggest, however, that if at all possible to include the cities in a successful agreement, as this will likely produce a better product. In the above example, the largest city doesn't have to sign the agreement, but suppose, for example, they are a provider of water and sewer, in which case it probably makes sense to include them. The law provides multiple opportunities for local governments to mediate their disputes over service delivery. If local governments cannot come to an agreement prior to the imposition of sanctions, they must utilize alternative dispute resolution. If the alternative dispute resolution is unsuccessful, the neutrals must prepare a written report which shall be submitted to each local government and made public. After the imposition of sanctions, any affected local government may file in Superior Court for mandatory mediation. Should this mediation be unsuccessful, the judge may resolve the remaining disputes. Once an agreement has been adopted by the necessary parties and submitted to the Georgia Department of Community Affairs, the department has 30 days to verify that the submitted agreement meets all of the necessary requirements. The Service Delivery Strategy Act requires that agreements be updated in conjunction with updates to comprehensive plans, whenever service delivery or revenue distribution agreements are changed, in the event of the creation, abolition, or consolidation of a new government, when an existing agreement expires, or whenever the parties agree. This has been a brief overview of the service delivery strategy. While it is not a substitute for legal counsel, we hope that it has been helpful. The Carl Vinson Institute of Government prides itself on providing a full range of technical assistance to local governments to help them work towards successful renegotiation. From facilitating meetings and conducting mediation to studying tax equity and service delivery issues, the Carl Vinson Institute of Government faculty are on hand to help cities and counties with their service delivery strategy related needs.